Good afternoon and welcome to this presentation by some of our premier physicians to talk about reproductive autonomy and reproductive health care in contemporary times. I will begin with an introduction to some of the work that Vermont has done over the past few years, and then we'll hear from Dr. Prine and Dr. Johansson about their experiences and the value that some of the legislation Vermont has passed offers them in their practice. So historically, Vermont, as you know, has been a leader in reproductive autonomy, passing our constitutional amendment. The constitutional amendment was originally devised 4 years before 2022 and 2018, but even before that, at a time when we couldn't pass a constitutional amendment. It is now in place. In addition, as part of the process to get to where we are today in protecting reproductive liberty and reproductive autonomy, we passed a law that also does similarly. It allows for women to choose to carry pregnancy to term or have a child or to terminate that pregnancy. So Vermont has, in addition, as we passed our Proposal 5, our Reproductive Liberty Constitutional Amendment, which is now Article 22 of the Vermont Constitution, we considered and worked with a vast group of people in the medical community to understand the need for shield laws to protect both patients and providers from intrusion into their personal lives and into their professional lives from those who disagree with their right to perform abortions or to provide reproductive counseling under our Constitution and under our laws. So as you know, Vermont shield laws do protect patients and providers from personal and professional violence. But I will say this, one of the things that has compelled us to put in place the constitutional amendment as well as our ensuing legislation has been an understanding that people choose to have families when they can best afford it. There's an economic element to the work that we have done. And we really understand, especially, that single parents have difficulty in managing their lives when they have children. We also know that families have discussions about when to have children. So allowing for a termination of pregnancy, allowing for family planning is critically important. And the laws that Vermont has put in place certainly reinforce those important issues. The most recent law that we have passed, it's not a law yet. It is a bill that has been passed out of our Senate Health and Welfare Committee. I, along with my vice chair, Senator Gulick, who will introduce herself in a minute, have passed S-28 to the House, and they are looking at that bill at this time. That bill will provide protection for providers from intrusion into the personal lives by limiting the listing of their private telephone and address information. That law will provide for and allow for providers, physicians to work with their patients by telemedicine and then to prescribe asynchronously through questionnaire, as a result of a questionnaire, prescription drugs that will serve the purpose to terminate abortion and pregnancy. And we will hear from both Dr. Prine and Dr. Johansson about S-28 and its importance for them particularly. I do want to introduce myself. I am Senator Ginny Lyons. I chair the Senate Health and Welfare Committee in Vermont. And I am joined by my colleagues, Senator Keisha Ram Hinsdale, who is the majority leader for the Democratic caucus, and also by Senator Martine Gulick, Laurent Gulick, who is the vice chair of our committee. I'm going to turn it over to Senator Gulick very briefly, and then introduce our first guest.
And Senator Gulick made a really good point that at this point we should switch with our guests so they are front and center in the Zoom screen, if that's okay with you.
Good
unless
idea.
for some reason that felt too exposing.
That's fine.
Okay, great. So we'll just,
So Senator Gulick should introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Senator Martine Laroque Buick, Vice Chair of Senate Health and Welfare, and I will be introducing our two guests momentarily. There you go. Yes. Honor.
Yeah, I think they.
yes, yeah.
We're good.
So thank you. So I will introduce our esteemed guests today. Dr. Renee Johansson, maybe you'll be a senator someday too. You are a board certified OBGYN and clinical assistant professor at Dartmouth's Geisel School of Medicine. Dr. Johansson founded Just Health, PLLC, a telehealth clinic providing medication abortion in all 50 states under Vermont's Shields law. She played a pivotal role in shaping Vermont's abortion shield legislation and has been an advocate for expanding access to reproductive health care throughout her career. Thank you for being here. Dr. Linda Prine is a professor of family and community medicine at Mount Sinai School of Medicine. Dr. Prine is a co-founder of the Reproductive Health Access Project, the Miscarriage and Abortion Hotline, M+A Hotline, and the Abortion Coalition for Telemedicine Access. As a provider for aid access, she has helped pioneer telemedicine abortion care, fighting against legal, financial, and logistical barriers to ensure people in all 50 states can access safe and effective medication abortion. Thank you for being here.
Hi, everyone. So I'm a family doctor and I don't live in Vermont yet because I need to be able to be a shield provider if I'm going to be in Vermont. I have my license, but until this law gets passed, I can't really move here, even though my grandchildren live here and this is where I would like to be. I have two sisters who also live in Vermont that some of you may know. Alison Prine is a poet and a therapist, and her poetry book this year was nominated as one of Vermont's 10 best books. So I'm a very proud older sister. And then my other sister, Barb Prine, who some of you may know, is a legal aid lawyer, and I think testifies not infrequently up here about her practice for Vermont legal aid. So, and I have one of my sons and his two children live in Burlington. So I have big reasons to be able to get this shield law passed, as well as that it's the right thing to do. So I want to back up a little bit and just talk about the abortion pills and why they need to be accessible to everyone. These pills are really safe. They started researching them in France in the late 80s. It was called RU486 then. So you might have heard about that. Lots of controversy when they first were being researched. People tried to bring them into the US. The US was like not having any part of it. France even got so worried about the anti-choice movement in the US that the company that was producing the pills tried to stop producing them. And the Ministry of Health said you could not do that, that this was the moral property of women, these pills, and they would not let the company stop producing them. So finally, at the very end of the Clinton administration, the FDA approved the pills on September 28th of 2000. I remember that because that's my birthday. So that was like breakthrough. Finally, we were going to be able to use the pills. But to tell you the truth, we had been using them for years before that because we were participating in every clinical study that came down the road. And this was the way we were able to get some access to the pills, because not everybody wants to have a procedure and be instrumented in order to have their abortion. And the pills you take in the privacy of your own home and with whoever you want to have with you. And it's pretty uneventful. So, and convenient. So people were anxious to have these pills available. And they had an increasingly great safety record because we did so much research during those years waiting for the FDA to approve them. I mean, we researched, is it best to take the second medicine 24, 36, 48 hours after the first medicine? Is 200 milligrams as good as 400, as good as 600 milligrams? Every kind of which way you can imagine using these pills. We tried and it all worked. It all worked. And there were like a percentage of difference, like this one way it would be 98% effective and this way it would be 96% effective. So, I mean, can you imagine, do you know of any other medicines that are 96 to 98% effective? Like really, if you've had to be on blood pressure medicines or this, that, or the other thing, it's a lot of juggling to find something that works. These medicines are amazing and they are very safe. The first medicine, mifepristone, it just blocks hormones. It blocks the hormone progesterone, which maintains a pregnancy. And in fact, it has so few side effects that it's now being researched as a contraceptive. Because if you've had to use birth control, the side effects of birth control pills or patch or ring or IUDs or whatever are extensive. And people just keep switching from one method to the other, trying to find something that works for them, but they all have side effects. But a hormone blocker has very little side effects. So it's being researched as a weekly pill or possibly a monthly pill, and we'll see. And that'll really confuse the world. Like if it can people start using it as a birth control. But stay tuned. So when the pills were first approved in the US, they came along with something called the REMS, which is really tight regulation over a medication. And this was not based on any evidence that this was a dangerous medicine, but it was just the politics of the day. It was hard enough to get it through. So they put all these strings on it, which things like you had to be certified as a doctor to provide the pills. The pills could not be provided in a normal pharmacy. You had to dispense them from your office. People had to swallow the first pill in front of you. I mean, how condescending and paternalistic is that? We did study that, by the way. I was part of that study. We studied whether or not women could swallow the pill and have the same outcomes when they swallowed it at home as they did when they swallowed it in the office. Can you believe it? How ridiculous is that? But that's part of what actually led to the approval of being able to mail the pills, which, we got to during the pandemic when it was really dangerous to have to go into the doctor's office to get the pills. So
There's the one silver lining of the pandemic, with reproductive health, because we were forced to be able to find a way to get pills to people who needed them. And so they relaxed the REMS and the FDA requirements so that we can mail them to people, keep them from coming in. So one silver lining.
We had to sue to be able to do that, to be able to mail the pills. During the pandemic, we took it to court with the ACLU and the AAFP, the Family Doctors Group, the American Board of Obstetrics and Gynecology. We all did this lawsuit, and a judge ruled that we could mail the pills because we had all this data. And then the Trump administration at the time blocked it and said judges cannot make medical decisions. Only the FDA can make this decision. Right? Now we have to remember that. Because
Maybe a long forgotten memory.
yeah. Anyway, we then took it to the FDA and the FDA agreed that it was safe. And so, the current protocol is that we can mail pills. And included in that was that pharmacies can dispense the pills. They don't need to be dispensed by the doctor and mailed by the doctor, although they can be. So we have way more options now, and that has come in really handy. So the latest change has been the shield laws, because when Roe fell, 1/3 of the country couldn't get abortions in their states anymore. And so people's only recourse was to travel. And for about the first year after Roe, that is what people had to do. There were community networks that were in an underground way getting pills to people, and Aid Access, the organization that we work for, was mailing pills from India. But getting them from India was taking 3 weeks. And so people were getting later and later in gestation, and that wasn't a good thing. And Renee and I both worked on this miscarriage and abortion hotline, which we created back in 2019 under the Trump administration then, because so many bad laws were being passed around the country to make it harder and harder to get the medications. So, and then people were getting them from underground networks and didn't have any medical person to talk to about it. So we made the hotline. People can call us. They get a doctor on the phone. The hotline's open from 8 a.m. until 1 p.m. East Coast time, and then shift 1 hour for the other time zones. And we answer questions from people who are getting their pills. wherever. And sometimes they're getting them at Planned Parenthood. I mean, they call us wherever they just need to talk to someone. And it's also a miscarriage hotline as well, because miscarriages are fairly beleaguered these days too, and trying to get follow-up care or even any care if you're having a miscarriage in many states is very difficult. So we did a lot of that. Anyway, what the pills had gotten better and better and less restricted regulatory wise up until Roe fell. And then when Roe fell, you know, everything became a mess. And that's when we started working on our shield laws. And it took us a year to get some of the strongest ones passed. Massachusetts was first. It took those folks a while to get set up. Washington State passed one, California, New York, Vermont, Colorado, and then most recently Maine and New Hampshire. So all of those states now have laws, and what those laws enable us to do is to mail pills to people in all 50 states. And you can say, well, how can you say that you're in New York and you can prescribe to somebody in Alabama or Mississippi? How can that be? Well, we have a very well-crafted questionnaire that asks people everything we need to know about them medically, that people can fill out actually on their phones if that's all they have. And we have reworked it multiple times to make sure that we're asking all of the things. And then we ask them for payment, and we charge $150. That's what most of the Shield Law providers charge, or less, whatever people can pay, which is kind of amazing for any aspect of healthcare. If you think about it, $150.
Including zero.
We slide down to zero. If people can, we never refuse somebody because they can't pay. And so, and if something in their questionnaire, and this is important and relevant to S28, if something in their questionnaire comes up where they answer it not according to what we know is the answer that makes it safe, it bumps out and we start a communication with the person over it. Like maybe they put down a last menstrual period that would put them at 15 weeks of pregnancy. Well, we only can provide the pills to 13 weeks because we follow the World Health Organization guidelines. So that would bump it out. We would have to write to them and say, I'm sorry, you're too far along for us. Here are some other resources, blah, blah, blah. So, and, you know, we ask about all the medications they're on, all the things that a normal medical history would ask. But, you know, for the most part, these are young, healthy people. You know, people who are getting pregnant are young and healthy 90% of the time. Every once in a while, they're really unhealthy and they're on a lot of medicines. And then pregnancy is even more unhealthy for them than having an abortion, because really in general, pregnancy is more dangerous than abortion.
I was going to add to that really specifically, trying to carry a pregnancy to term is 20% or 20 times, I'm sorry, not 20%, 20 times more dangerous for women than having a first trimester abortion. It is, but we, you know, patients don't come to the obstetrician's office and when we give them risks and benefits, we don't say, oh, okay, so trying to carry this pregnancy to term, you're 20 times more likely to die than if you have an abortion. But yet we're doing that for abortion patients, giving them all the risks and benefits. It is always safer if a woman chooses to have an abortion. It is always safer for her to have an abortion. It's really that simple from a pure safety medical standpoint.
So what's changed in our country since we could get these pills by mail in all 50 states is the rate of abortion has actually gone up. It's gone up from where it was when abortion was legal. So if you look at the charts, you know, here's the abortion rate and it goes down a little when birth control becomes more accessible and goes up a little when birth control is less accessible. And then all of a sudden you have the fall of Roe and abortion goes down. And then you have the Shield laws get passed and abortion goes up. And what has happened is the number of abortions that happen in brick and mortar clinics have not changed. Those clinics mostly moved out of the southern states into other states, and other clinics just got way more busy. But for all of the people who could probably could never get to an abortion clinic because they lived far away and they couldn't take time off from work and they didn't have enough money. And all of the things that made abortion hard to access, even when it was legal, those things are mostly not applicable to getting the pills. You don't have to travel. You don't have to take time off from work. You don't even have to pay. So you can choose to have an abortion if that's the right thing for you. And so the abortion rate is now going up in our country now that people have true access. The birth rate hasn't changed. So it's all a little confusing how this is all working out. And, you know, hopefully people are getting what they need one way or the other. I mean, we know that they aren't all the time because we read the news stories out of Texas and Georgia where we're seeing that people are not getting care in hospitals when they do have a complication or an emergency, whether it's a miscarriage or an abortion. It's pretty dangerous to be living in those states now and getting pregnant. But abortion is accessible like it never was before because of the SHIELD laws, which is kind of amazing. And I talk to, you know, we take call for our practice and we talk to people a lot. When you're on call, you're with your phone nonstop. And we hear about everybody's fears because that's mostly why they're calling us. They'll call and they'll say, I'm bleeding this in such amount. Is that okay? And the answer is always, yeah, that's what's supposed to happen. It's okay. But they're so scared because the legal climate that they live in. It's a really scary time. And so we say, you know, I understand because they'll say, I'm sorry I bothered you, but I just was scared. I'm here by myself and I just have never done this before and I just didn't know if this was all okay. And we say, we understand this is what we're hearing from everybody all day long. You're not the only one. Thousands of women are doing this just like you are, and they're just as scared too. And we shouldn't have to be living this way. And then we get into this great conversation about how terrible all this is in this day and age, that women have lost their rights. So
And then they're terrified. They call us terrified at the thought of maybe needing to go to the hospital and interacting with the medical system and then possibly the legal consequences. They're terrified. Even when they need to go, they don't go because they're afraid to.
So then what is the consequence for us? Well, one of our doctors has had 2 charges leveled against her, one by the state of Texas, where a boyfriend took his girlfriend to the hospital because she got scared about her bleeding being too heavy. And he got suspicious that she had used abortion pills instead of was having a miscarriage. So when he went home, he dug through the garbage and found the box of pills. And then since Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, has been advertising for boyfriends to step forward and tell on their partners, and with a bounty, with a 10,000 or more bounty that you can get if you tell on your girlfriend, he took it to Ken Paxton and they charged Dr. Maggie Carpenter of New York State with providing abortion pills in Texas. So that's the first charge against her. The other charge against her happened from Louisiana. Same thing, pills were found. It's not clear exactly how. It was between a mother and a daughter. It's very, you know, we don't know the truth of the story yet because we're only hearing from the prosecution's side. And their claim is that the mother was coercing the daughter to have this abortion. But we actually know that that's not the case, but I can't tell you any of the details. But anyway, the Attorney General and Governor of Louisiana are so excited to have this case and charge her with a crime. And so she's also now charged with providing abortion pills to a minor in the state of Louisiana. So this is what's happening to the doctors. And that's why we're asking for our names to be left off the pill bottles, because we want to keep doing this work, but we would like to not have to deal with Louisiana and Texas in this kind of a way, because it's very scary. Louisiana even published Dr. Carpenter's home address. She had to start getting 24/7 security, because nutcases were calling and coming to the house. So it's really been a horrible thing. So S28 covers the 2 things that I talked about here: names off pill bottles And the issue of the questionnaire, there was some discussion about whether the questionnaire was an okay thing to start off before we prescribe. And that's what we've been doing in all these other states all along. But Vermont had a requirement that before you could prescribe a medication, you had to meet in person or on video with a doctor, thinking that this would prevent, I'm not sure what all it's supposed to prevent. Maybe it's supposed to prevent sharing the pills with someone else. But if you were in the office and you got the pills, you could still share them with someone else. So we couldn't think of anything that this prevented, really. And that's why we don't think it should be considered. It's not considered medically necessary. The FDA doesn't require it. And they've been very strict with their regulation around the pills. So this statute needs to go away that exists in Vermont, and S28 would make it go away and would allow us to do the questionnaire, mail the pills, and then we're available. And that's when people need us, like after they get their pills. That's when they can call. That's when we're on the phone with people all day long. So we're doing the right thing medically, and we just need Vermont to come along and support us. And it looks like they're going to.
And I'd like to add that that research about this protocol, how we're doing it with the questionnaire, was very, very well studied well before the pandemic. But because of all of the restrictions that were placed on abortion medications, we were never able to implement it until the pandemic came. They loosened those restrictions. We had these protocols already. They are safe. And so putting this barrier in front of it, we would take care of 50 people a day. We can't organize that many phone calls. We can't organize, and it's not necessary. It does not change outcomes. So why put a barrier when one isn't needed? Also, there are people who wouldn't be able to meet with us on a phone call or a Zoom call because they're in precarious situations at home. They don't want to tell their parents, and in Vermont, you're allowed to be a minor and make a decision about having an abortion. And so it's just a barrier, and it doesn't change the outcomes. It doesn't increase safety. It's just a barrier, actually. I just wanted to add. Yeah.
I think you have the floor now, Dr.
Oh, any questions?
I'll just add one other thing that I mentioned earlier that S28 does, and that keeps your private address, telephone, and information off of general web pages. So it's only where you work. So that's another addition. I don't know how much you've been involved in having interest in that.
Yeah, I work at home, so
Yeah,
it doesn't help you.
doesn't help you. Yeah, well, it wouldn't, but certainly if you're at Mount Sinai or another office, it might help.
Dr. Johannesson, would you like the floor before we go to questions?
I'm fine. We discussed how we were going to do it, so I think we're ready for questions.
Okay, I saw Representative Molly Burke. And are you okay if I say your name on the recording? Okay.
Absolutely would love it. Thank you so much for your work. It's really good. My question is, so if a state does not have a shield law, does that mean, what is the landscape for people sending abortion medication to somebody in like a place like Texas? Is that
You want to be in a shield law state to do that, because otherwise they could extradite you. Like they tried to extradite Dr. Carpenter, and the Ulster County clerk said, no, I have my instructions from the state attorney general and from Governor Hochul. I'm not complying with your request for extradition. And
so what about the person receiving? So what if when the dog is shielded, but what about the person?
it's not a crime in any of these states yet to actually take the medicines.
Okay.
It's a crime to help them. It's a crime in some states, it's a crime to drive them across state lines to get the pills somewhere else. There's a lot of law. You can't be a doctor in that state and give them the pills. You can't be a pharmacist in that state and dispense the pills. You can't be a medical assistant or somebody on who works for a fund and is going to supply people with money. you can't do that in that state anymore. Although, you know, some people are doing brave things and helping people out anyway. They're, you know, folks are getting their abortions one way or another for the most part. But what's legal is only to be in a state like Vermont, New York, all the ones I mentioned.
And women will always get the abortions they need. I mean, we know through history, since the earliest medical writings, women have found the need for abortions and have been self-managing abortions for all of humanity, written humanity that we know of. And so it's not going to stop. It's who's going to be providing it. Is it going to be somebody? Because right now you can go online and get pills from a pharmacy in India or Mexico, and they'll ship it to you without any instructions, without any follow-up. And they're not FDA-approved medications. We send out FDA-approved medications. And so, you know, do you want women to be able to have at least some medical supervision for the safe procedure or none at all, is basically what we're saying.
And what is on the horizon federally that might change the current?
So there's two things we're really worried about. One is that the FDA will roll back their approvals to some earlier version before we were allowed to mail the pills. And we're trying to work on what our workaround would be for that. Because the FDA doesn't really have much enforcement capacity, and like half its staff has been laid off anyway. And who they do enforce through is through the distributors. And then the distributors would have to know among who they're sending to, who's mailing pills and who's not mailing pills, in order to try to somehow discipline us. And we think that would be pretty hard to do. So we're not that worried about the FDA changes, because we've got a federal agency that has been pretty much incapacitated.
Mm-hmm.
The other possibility is the Comstock law, which is this law from 1870. It's an anti-obscenity, anti-pornography, and anti-abortion law. And it's mostly about not allowing anything abortion related to be mailed. So it could shut down potentially all abortions in the country, because procedural abortions require equipment and, you know, instruments and tubing and machines and exam room paper. And what are you going to say is helping the abortion? You know, the anesthesiologist gets their medications. You know, there's a lot that is at risk there. So it wouldn't even just be pills, which we do mail. So how do we get around Comstock? So California has an idea, and we hope that their law will go through. They are saying in their tweak to their SHIELD law, they have, just as we have S28 here, they have something called AB 260, that medical care is legislated by the state. Medical care is, there's a state licensure, there's state board of medicine, there's state medical society, state regulations, that medical care is under the purview of the state. So this 1870 Comstock law should not be able to tell doctors that they can't provide a medication, because that's just such an old law that had nothing to, has nothing to do with today's day and age. And so their tweak is a sort of re-upping that medical care is under the auspices of the state. Now, the Supreme Court actually said that, right? In the fall of Roe, that's what they said, that medical care, when it comes to abortion, is up to the states. So we think this might be a pretty good strategy for blocking Comstock. So we're hoping that some of our legislators here in Vermont will think about a way.
Legislators are.
That would be great language to put into a bill for Vermont as well, to say, in our state, we have control over medical prescribing and medical licensing and so on, and we will not comply with a 1870 statute that says that abortion pills can't be mailed, because we know that they're safely mailed.
And it's in our Constitution, so.
Right.
It doesn't change.
Constitution probably does protect us from that particular issue.
Right.
Worthwhile having it more fully embedded in statute, to say the least.
That's
Yes,
what one
Representative
Representative and I had to upstairs, healthcare committee. So we're working on S-28 now.
Oh.
Is there language?
Well,
it's too late.
It's
It's
never-
not too late. It's never too
I
late.
mean, you're looking at the chair, so.
Well, you work with David Cohen, right? And I think,
Well, look at, I talked to your person there who was the woman at the computer,
Oh, right,
and
yes.
I told her about this.
Oh, well,
So she's gonna
Yes.
look at AB 260.
Right.
And it, I mean,
I
if
know
it's a
about it.
matter of lifting a few sentences.
I was gonna mention it if I got invited to House Healthcare, but now they know, so good.
Well, I know. Oh, but did you talk to Jen Carney? She's our legal counsel, is that?
Yes.
Okay, so now she's aware, so that on Tuesday, when it comes back, I can ask where we are.
Oh, I asked a couple of lawyers that I know who work on legislative reproductive rights, if they have looked at the California language and if they think it would hold weight against Comstock. So if so, I'll try and send you those sentences.
Right, and we also, yeah, and we have PPNNE in the room, who can probably support that in person.
We'll have a conversation with our House counterparts and, because that is an important addition to, legislation.
So I could depend on you to talk to Alyssa and I can depend on you to help me.
This is how legislation.
Right.
This is amazing.
you know,
Thank God women
neither
still run
Linda or I
things.
are on call right now, obviously, because we're here with you guys, but sometimes, I'm at the medical school or I'm at working with the residents and we'll work the hotline together. Because I think to hear somebody in Texas or Alabama or Louisiana, talking about how terrified they are, and then how relieved they are that in fact they're safe, they're being cared for by us, and that this is life-saving. This is their lifeboat. This is their, it's really meaningful for the people who are all over the country, this work that we're doing. It definitely saves lives, it saves families, it saves communities. It's so essential. And again, to know that Vermont and California and our states are trying to really help women all over this country. It's so vital.
From Texas who was told she should never get pregnant again because she had so many health risks and she almost died in the last pregnancy she had had. She has heart failure. She's on, all these different medicines. I could hear her short of breath over the phone with me. And she was pregnant again. Like, that was the fact. And she was in Texas and she wanted to get pills from us. And so, of course, we sent her the pills. But, it's true that it's life-saving sometimes because a pregnancy would be terrible for some people. And it is a health risk, and that the idea that there are health exceptions in these southern states, that's just not happening because, by the time you worked your way through all of the paperwork to prove your health exception, you'd probably be full term.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just wondering.
And can you introduce yourself? I'm sorry, I couldn't do that.
I'm a visitor from Bennington.
Oh,
And
great.
I'm here because my grandson is a page.
Oh, yay.
So that's not related to what you're talking about. But I have, I've been, I wonder how these women or caregivers find you online. How do they get in touch with you if they're not allowed to, if they're scared to even go onto their phones to do these searches?
Well, there's Google, and then there's a website called plancpills.org that lists by state all of the places where you can order pills. And
Can
we
you
asked
say the website again?
Plan C pills.
Plan C. Oh, got it.
Like
Right,
Plan
like
B
Plan
is the morning after pill and Plan C is the abortion pill. So plancpills.org. Then we asked people this when on our questionnaire, where did you find out about us? On our evaluation afterwards. TikTok, Reddit,
Right.
Facebook, Instagram, like all the places. We do have social media people who put their things up. And of course, Instagram actually takes us down all the time and says that we're peddling illegal medicine. But we argue with them and get back up as fast as we can, or sometimes we make a new way of writing our name or writing the word abortion without the right letters, you make a zero instead of an O, and so lots of tricks to stay up there, but yeah, it's all the new things.
Both of you, whoever.
Jessica Barnard with the Vermont Medical Society, and thank you for your work. Thank you for being here. Can you talk about a little bit about the ramifications on your ability to travel? Because you're putting yourselves out there, you're very public and brave about what you're doing, but there have to be consequences. So,
Well, I don't travel to any place that's not a shield state. And it's not clear that shield states will protect us if we're not prescribed. If I were accused of prescribing to somebody from Texas and I had done that with my New York license, it's not clear that while I'm in Vermont, I'm actually protected. So I try not to have any paper trail when I'm in Vermont. Like I rented my car in New York. I took the train to Albany, rented my car in New York. And I drive very carefully, all the things. And we are working on something that they're calling the MAPA, which I forget what it stands for, but it's basically reciprocity among the shield law states so that we will protect each other's providers and consider them our own if they were accused, while being in Vermont of what they did in New York or vice versa. So we're working on that, but it's not there yet. So I'm very careful.
Is that something that we need to put into statute?
I'm sure. Yeah, I know, yeah.
Absolutely sure.
I think it's a group.
I think
Or is it
well, the Democratic Governors Reproductive Health Alliance is working on it, but Vermont doesn't have a Democratic governor. So
But we have bipartisan support.
yes, I know. So we are in touch with your Attorney General, I believe, and with well, not the governor, but we're aware that Vermont's on the right side of things, and if they can make this alliance agreement, because it could just be a governor's executive order. If that can happen in all these states, then we will certainly ask Vermont to participate. The governor will. And if not, then I think it's a good idea to try and get something in statute. I wonder, we could ask if that's also just another sentence.
Something.
Should any physician who prescribed, across state lines, with a license from another shield law state, they would be protected well. Absolutely, yeah. It's a great idea.
Hi, Stephanie Winters, also from the Vermont Medical Society, and I wondered if you could comment, and you've said some overarching themes that I've heard. There have been some questions in the legislature about patients potentially not being honest on their questionnaires about their health conditions, but you mentioned having a patient with heart failure. This safety profile, this medication is completely fine for them to have. So can you talk about the different modalities, the different venues of seeing patients, and if that makes a difference or not?
Yeah, that's a really good question because it turns out that the list of medical contraindications for using these medicines is almost nothing. Like you can't be on, you're not supposed to be on chronic steroids. And if you're on blood thinners, you might need to skip a few doses while you take this. So there's just a tiny little list of things that make it medically not okay. And then the issue of, could they lie to you about their gestational age and maybe be further along? And, ultrasound is not required by the FDA for using this medication. So that is certainly something somebody could do, whether they're in your office or whether they're at home. It's a scary proposition for most people. They really don't want to do something that's going to endanger themselves. However, there are people who are in desperation to end their pregnancies, don't find out until later, and do take the medicines later, not necessarily getting them from us, but getting them from the online pharmacies where they ask no questions. And the thing is, the medicines do work. They do work later in pregnancy. It's a more miserable experience for sure and scary. And I have had people when I'm on the hotline call in, a lot of angst over what they've seen and what to do with the fetus. It's really a sad, sad situation and scary for the person who's doing this. But it does work. It's not actually endangering people.
I wonder too, I remember before Proposition 5 passed, we got hold of a flyer that there was actual continuing medical education being offered that kind of presented itself as an alternative view of Proposition 5. And a lot of us were really alarmed through UVA Medical Center. And they weren't condoning it, but there was nothing they could do to stop it, they said, from receiving medical credit for that. Do you all in the medical society help with continuing medical education that includes, providers who can talk about the risk of continuing a pregnancy versus, the low risk of taking this medication and, helping your other medical professionals support them on the front lines of, a very quickly politicizing medical landscape overall?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yes, we have covered, certainly the policy and legal aspects that are being support. We can certainly cover clinical topics as well.
Right. Just because I know, it has come up with licensure. They are licensing the folks who have the shield laws, protecting them and, just making sure that they are fully aware on the licensing board of, the risks that these folks are already taking to hang their license out there to do this work.
I was going to mention with heart failure, certainly providing an abortion in the first trimester is infinitely more safe for that person. If she isn't able to travel outside of Texas for any number of reasons, it's too expensive, she has children, or she can't.
7 children.
Wow.
Then at least, with what we're doing, yes, it's still safer for her to have that abortion than to continue that pregnancy. And with the way we do it with the shield law protection, they have our support through the whole thing. They have medical support, they have legal support. We try to usher them through the situation as safely as possible, medically and legally for them. So that's why the exceptions are also not perfectly pure contraindications. We can't have a standard of care through the entire United States because it's different in Texas than it is here in Vermont. And so, but at least we hold their hands through things and we try to help them. And the thing is also we're seeing people at very low gestational ages now because they do know about us, because word has gotten out. Typically, I would say 80% of the people are less than 5 weeks because word has gotten out. And now that the pills are available very, very quickly, instead of coming from India, they're just accessing them so much earlier. We're not really seeing those later gestations because people do know about us.
I just realized that we're coming close to 1:00. Why don't I'll say a few words. Do you want to say a few words first or close this out?
That's a question.
Yes, can we get our, yes.
Thank you. Laura Bailey, I'm a visitor from Proctor. Just to kind of wrap this all up and submit any question, but we've heard a lot about what legislation and healthcare professionals are doing to kind of like take steps to protect women's reproductive rights. What are some things that Vermont citizens can do to create awareness and kind of support you in that process?
That's kind of how I was going to close out. I mean, to support and uplift you particularly, I have lots of thoughts about who needs to be elected to uphold these laws. But if you wanted to take that just in terms of, as people, practitioner.
Well, I think, there there are organizations that need support, like the Miscarriage and Abortion Hotline is all volunteers. It's really two sets of volunteers. There's the doctors that answer the calls about the medical work. And then we have logistics volunteers who, thanks for coming, who answer questions about how can I get an abortion? Or sometimes they just are having difficulty navigating a website and the logistics volunteers help them. So supporting that, volunteering for that, helping get the word out about that, reposting on your social media about the Miscarriage and Abortion Hotline, about aid access, about Plan C pills. So doing all the social media work, and getting your friends to do it as well. What else?
Can they get in touch with you to actually volunteer? Like, could we put that call out there through channels?
There's a place that tells you where to go on the website.
Okay, okay.
Post.org website, because it's not me that screens the volunteers.
Right. Is that similar for you, Dr. Johansson, or you have your students only?
I'm sorry, I do really, it's currently only have my students.
Yeah.
Only because it's really hard to, I was gonna say, I just heard of this really fantastic new group and I've spoken to the person running Men for Choice.
Oh.
Yeah, it's actually, and there's gonna be a panel discussion at Dartmouth if you want to try to attend. Anybody wants to attend, on the 23rd of April. And you know, it's, men really want to be involved and support women and support choice. And I think we need their voices. There's 60 million men who at least who believe in choice and in a woman's right to choose. And I really appreciate this group sort of mobilizing more and getting the word out there. So if you want to look up their website, they have fellowships and stuff like that. And they're really organized. They're not just slap shot. They got their act together.
Putting that on social too.
Yeah.
Google. So, and I will just say thank you. Those are really good comments, and getting involved can also mean supporting Planned Parenthood, that has been, a strong advocate for all the work that we've done here in the legislature, and very helpful. And also understanding that abortion is one aspect of reproductive choice and reproductive liberty. And so ensuring that we don't see some of the small steps, the camel's nose under the tent, that erodes reproductive liberty, whether it's in a physician's office or a counseling service or your legislature. So it's very important. I'm glad that you're connected, and, stay connected, I think, all the way around.
Yeah, I mean,
I want to close, I want to give my closing comments because I'm going to have to leave, but I'm old enough to remember before Roe v. Wade. And I remember, and I know some horrific stories and have seen friends and others live through those. And so when the election started in 2015 for the 2016 November election, that's when I started thinking about the reproductive liberty proposal for our Constitution. It is so critically important that we understand the historical development of all of this, because we don't want to fall into the pitfall of the Victorian age with the Comstock Law, or the pitfall that we've just seen with the overturn of Roe v. Wade. So just being knowledgeable is so important, and bringing your ideas to the table is critical. I'm leaving. I'm going to let Senator Ram Hinsdale and Senator Bullock close out, but thanking both Dr. Prine and Dr. Johansson for helping us out today.
well, and thank you, Senator Lyons, for carrying this banner, and doing the work for so long.
We're all carrying the banner. I think we're really lucky in this state.
Yeah, so we'll let you slip out if you need to. I just wanted to say, especially, for people in the room and people who get this recording or are watching on the live stream, please run for office. And, I think we finally in Vermont started to realize we are not immune from anything. We have probably the most durable law we can have on the books, which is a constitutional amendment enshrining abortion care and reproductive freedom. But that does not mean that we are safe every day from these small decisions that eat away at reproductive justice across the full spectrum. Just yesterday, we had a debate on the floor about whether or not people should be considered medically vulnerable enough to receive shelter if they're in their first and second trimester as opposed to their third trimester. And as the most recent pregnant person in the Senate, I got up and talked about how you're going to tell someone at 15 weeks to come back at 28 weeks, and was momentarily shut down by the Senate minority leader, who said, no, but you'd be protected because you'd be going into your third trimester. And then we started doing math. And if you are someone who has been pregnant, then you think a lot about every single week of your pregnancy. Does my baby have all hemispheres of their brain, all chambers of their heart, everything they need to survive at week 10, week 11, and so on and so forth? And we have an entire caucus in the Senate of people who will never be pregnant. And that group voted as a block to decide whether or not women are medically vulnerable in the first and second trimester versus the third. This was yesterday. So, we should not take for granted that we've taken a step backwards in the legislature in terms of how many women are in office, because the sea change in who's at the table politically has been almost, if not entirely, the election of far more men than women here. And so, we have significant work to do to rebuild and to elect more women, and to hold men like the governor and others accountable, to not just be protective of access to reproductive justice and abortion in name only, but in every single decision that they are making. The last thing I want to say too is, although it might sound unrelated, we have legislators who just informed me, they're on calls with other New England attorneys about being in rapid response for immigration cases. And they are being told, as they start to go after these immigrants and deport them and put them in chains and all kinds of horrible things, they are going to start going after immigration attorneys. And so no one has been on the front lines, whether reluctantly or not, of these political battles than our providers. And you have a lot to teach us about the moments we are about to go in other fields, where people will be in danger for exercising their professional judgment. So you're heroes, you're sheroes, and we just really want to thank you for doing this work long enough to transmit wisdom and strength and courage and knowledge to all of us in this fight. We very much appreciate you.
Thank you.